Alright everybody, here's a 2-article video that's going to be the last for foreign news today, then I'll have to cover something very domestic. Here we go. So, Russia is now, from Ruptly, Russia now is mulling over using yuan and euro instead of US dollar for external loans in 2020. Further turning away from the greenback, Russia is eyeing the yuan and the euro as currencies for eurobonds next year. Russian Finance Minister Anton Silvanov, probably butchered the hell out of that, has said on the sidelines of an IMF and World Bank meeting. Answering journalist questions about the impact of U.S. sanctions on the Russian sovereign debt market, Silvanov said that Moscow will consider the issue as it has been creating the infrastructure to cause the Chinese currency for loans in recent years. We can also try to go into euro, he added. Although there are fewer euro investors, Russia doesn't see any problems with the restrictions on borrowing in dollars and will not issue euro bonds denominated in the greenback, he stressed. Earlier this year, the U.S. imposed another round of financial restrictions on Russia related to the poisoning of former double agent Sergei Skripal. In Salisbury, in the UK, the sanctions prohibit U.S. banks from certain types of engagement with the Russian sovereign debt market, and also stipulate that Washington will oppose any lending to Russia by international financial institutions. Russia's budget for 2020 allows Moscow to borrow up to $3 trillion on foreign markets, but if it has to use euro for the loans, that figure may be smaller, according to Silvanov. Next year, Russia is also planning to issue the long-anticipated Panda Bond, sovereign debt dominated in Chinese currency. The move may allow Russia and its largest trade partner, China, to skirt U.S. financial pressure of sanctions and tariffs. So, it seems that the financial alliance between Russia and China is going on ahead. And you know that Trump's trade war basically created this alliance, by the by. The yuan is actually worth a great deal in comparison to the dollar. And while the dollar may be the world's current reserve currency, the British pound is ahead by quite a bit. And even the yuan itself is comparable to the dollar. I don't know if it's necessarily above or below, but it's pretty damn close. So it also has candidacy. Now, I don't know what the Russian ruble is worth, but we are talking about foreign loans here, meaning Russia collecting on debt. As for external loans, owing debts to Russia so they can further their economy. And if the dollar's just not doing it, then the yuan and the euro would be put ahead of the dollar in terms of foreign financial power. The dollar will not lose any physical value, but it will lose some clout. This would go a long way to a financial trade alliance between Russia and China, which could put the United States at a serious disadvantage. It'll be like a new Cold War. Instead of nukes, it'll be dollar signs. And that will be entirely Trump's fault. And with both of them, you know, Russia's overall GDP is a little less than the state of California. China's overall GDP, while centrally planned and tightly controlled, is actually looking pretty good lately. So, it's not like they don't pose no threat whatsoever. But it's not super significant either. But it will make U.S. foreign trade very complicated. So, thanks once again, Mr. Trump, for being a little too adversarial in the free trade market. Good job. However, speaking to Trump's trade policy, while it may be adversarial and off-putting to some, this article should make a fairly good argument for the more beneficial aspects of Trump's trade policy. This is from Reason, Free Trade, Free Markets. It says, score 1 for Trump's trade policy. Putting online speech protections and trade deals makes sense. For once, the Trump administration is on the right side of a debate with Congress over trade. Even as the Trump administration is cheerleading congressional efforts to roll back protections for free speech online, it's enshrining the same protections in 2 new trade deals. That has irked members of both parties on Capitol Hill as lawmakers mull a possible rewrite of long-standing liability protections for online platforms and consider whether to approve President Donald Trump's new trade deals with Canada and Mexico, and with Japan. But this is a situation that inverts the usual relationship between Congress and the current administration when it comes to trade. This time the White House is doing what's right. Specifically, members of Congress are upset that the new United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA, an update of the 25-year-old North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, as well as the just-announced deal between the U.S. and Japan, will include provisions shielding tech companies from liability for content. Though it's not a simple copy-paste, the trade deals effectively duplicate the promise made by the Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act, a 1996 law that protects online speech by freeing platforms from liability for user-created content. That was championed by Bill Clinton. He was a Democrat. I actually miss Bubba Bill. Section 230 is the Internet's First Amendment. Putting that language into trade deals helps ensure that a free and open Internet is the global standard. These laws prevent websites from being sued for their users' content, and they are fundamental to the United States. Preeminence in the digital space, says Clark Packard, Trade Policy Counsel for the R Street Institute. Unfortunately, it is true that the United States is largely preeminent on the Internet. Hell, Americans invented the Internet. It's our creation. It's our baby. It's our violent, hate-filled little baby that shares weird, funny cat videos and bizarre memes, and sometimes I wonder why the Internet was invented, or if it was even a good idea. Sometimes I really do wonder. But this is a wonderful thing, because tech companies have been very divisive and very subversive of free speech online. And I could not be happier about hearing how this might actually bring an end to it. Twitter has been one of the greatest offenders. I've heard of tweets being edited. Hell, I've seen tweets edited. I've seen it with my own two eyes. I myself have not been censored on Twitter yet. Of course, that's because I'm really good at avoiding unwanted attention, so. But not everyone has that talent. YouTube has also been algorithmically sending people down what has been called the YouTube memory hole. There's all kinds of sort of soft censorship and shadow banning tactics that have been used. This would go a long way towards putting a stop to that, because now free speech is more or less guaranteed on the Internet. Good. We need it. But protecting online speech isn't just about maintaining Enlightenment values in a digital world. It's also good for business. The U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis estimates that the digital economy counts for about 6.5% of America's gross domestic product. About $1.3 trillion, a figure that has been growing steadily for years by signing trade agreements that prohibit government from raising barriers to digital trade or imposing expensive liability requirements on digital platforms. America is helping to ensure that growth continues. Including Section 230 language in trade deals is also an important move in a long-term battle over the global Internet. America got to write the rules for the first few generations of the online world because it was the most connected country and the home of the most major tech firms. Those things are still true, but less so, and competing visions for the rules that govern the Internet are already well established. The European Union is building a legal framework that differs from the free and open model established by Section 230, one that includes more stringent regulations for digital platforms and how they relate to users, and there is nothing free or open about China's ideal online space. No, there isn't. And the EU, the European Onion, because they make me cry, has had a lot of crazy regulations concerning memes in the past. It's like, oh, so a meme's a little offensive, which, it has to be a little offensive if it's truly funny. So you want to regulate it out of existence because it doesn't conform to your ethical standard. Bitch, there is only one ethical standard, and that is common core ethics. Thank God for Socrates. But your so-called ethics in the European Onion is little more than just an authoritarian expression of Brussels' willful testament to its underlings. There is nothing ethical about it. It's just censorship, plain and simple. But those differing legal frameworks of the digital world are going to clash with one another in the environment, binding together governments to protect free speech online makes a lot of sense. Would that Trump would apply to a lesson to other aspects of trade? But some members of Congress are intent on carving up Section 230 in a misguided attempt at holding tech platforms like Google and Facebook accountable. And they don't see it that way. Representative Frank Pallone, chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, said during this week's Section 230 hearing that Trump is unlikely to get support from Congress for trade deals that include provisions subject to ongoing congressional debate. These objections are intellectually dishonest, says Ashkan Kazarian, a legal fellow at Tech Freedom, a pro-Section 230 nonprofit. Including liability protections in trade deals does not mean that congressional hands are tied in addressing the issues surrounding content moderation and platform liability. Congress frequently debates or rewrites domestic laws that are similar to provisions included in trade deals, having intellectual property protections written into NAFTA. For example, has not stopped Congress from adjusting copyright laws in America, as Catherine Oyama, Director of Intellectual Property Policy for Google, told lawmakers at the hearing. Congress does, of course, have the power to change laws whenever it wants, but scrapping or rewriting Section 230 would be a mistake, and Trump is right to push for liability protections in trade deals, especially while Section 230 is the law of the land in America. Personally, I think it should be made more difficult for the Congress to change the law all willy-nilly like that. Force it to come down to a vote. Say they have to vote on it. Maybe not everyone agrees that a law should be changed. But not that Trump has likely has much to do with it when he talks about the USMCA. He rarely, if ever, mentions the need for updated digital rights arrangements. Mostly he's been interested in raising tariffs on imported cars or pinning political blame for the loss of American manufacturing jobs. And while the president isn't leading the charge on Capitol Hill to rewrite or abolish Section 230, he's certainly been supportive of the effort. Also, it's not as if the Trump administration overcame any dramatic hurdles to have those provisions included. The NAFTA rewrite or the Japanese trade deal. The other three countries involved in those agreements were already abiding by American standards for online trade, so the deals mostly just codified the status quo. But when even the most anti-trade administration in recent American history is pushing to make it easier for America to export its successful legal framework for online free speech, that should give you an idea about just how off-base the congressional effort to scrap Section 230 really is. We need Section 230 to prevent online censorship and be allowed to say whatever the hell we want. It really is the First Amendment of the Section 230. Now, I support a YouTuber an idea of the YouTuber by a guy by the name of StickHeckenhammer666. You may also know him as Tara Warwick. And I support this idea of his of having like an Internet Bill of Rights, a set of rules that everyone agrees to and abides by. I absolutely support that idea. I think it's wonderful. And maybe this is the first step towards that. It'll certainly make it easier to establish. Once you accept this principle, then the next principle will be much easier to accept, and so on. A sort of slippery slope, but in a positive direction rather than a negative one. It sets a precedent. The president sets a precedent. Haha. But anyway, that's what you get, folks. This is your economic news. Trade deals that support internet free speech are being established. The Chinese and Russian trade alliance is here. It's going to be an interesting. It's going to be an interesting year, 2020, as far as economics goes. I'm looking forward to sorting through the chaos. Believe me. Anyway, peace.